The courtroom was silent, except for the faint sound of papers rustling and the soft echo of a gavel tapping against wood. The judge, an elderly man with glasses perched precariously on the bridge of his nose, glanced over at the child sitting nervously on the witness stand. She was small, no older than 8 or 9, with dark curly hair pulled into a tight ponytail. Her eyes were wide, the kind of wide that spoke of fear, yet there was something else behind them, something resolute. Maya's hands, small and trembling, rested in her lap. Beside her, lying obediently on the floor, was her service dog, Sparky. He was a golden retriever, his fur glistening in the dim light of the courtroom. He seemed peaceful, his eyes half closed as if he were merely resting, but Maya knew better. Sparky had been with her through more than anyone in this room could imagine. He wasn't just a dog. He was her protector, her friend, and, today, he might be the key to everything. The courtroom was packed. Journalists lined the back of the room, scribbling notes furiously, while spectators sat in stiff chairs, watching the dramatic custody case unfold. The air was thick with tension. On one side of the room sat the wealthy Anderson family, poised and confident, their lawyer standing by them like a shield. On the other side was Maya's foster family, a humble, kind-hearted couple who had taken her in when she had nowhere else to go. But this wasn't just a typical custody battle. It had started out like any other, but the longer the proceedings dragged on, the stranger it became. The Anderson family, powerful, influential, was trying to gain custody of Maya after her parents' tragic car accident. They claimed they could offer her the stability and opportunities she needed. But Maya wasn't so sure. Not only did she have a deep connection with her foster family, but something about the Andersons didn't sit right with her. And she wasn't the only one who felt that way. The judge, Judge Roberts, cleared his throat and looked down at the papers before him, then back at Maya. He tried to appear calm, but it was clear that something unusual was happening in this case. A little girl sitting quietly, signaling her dog. It was unheard of. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that Maya knew more than anyone had anticipated. Miss Maya, Judge Roberts began, his voice gentle yet firm, can you please tell the court how you feel about the Andersons and your foster family? Maya didn't answer right away. She stared down at Sparky, whose head was now tilted slightly, his golden eyes watching her intently. There was a moment of stillness in the room before she shifted in her seat, a slight movement of her hand. It was so subtle that no one noticed at first, but Sparky did. The dog's ears perked up, and he stood, moving quietly toward Maya's side, his body low to the ground, as though he were waiting for something. Judge Roberts squinted. Was she trying to say something to the dog? I like being with my foster family. Maya's voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but there was something powerful in her words. They love me. And Sparky is always with me. He keeps me safe. Her eyes flickered toward the Andersons, and then she gave Sparky another small signal. This time, there was no mistaking it, she was directing him. Sparky began to walk around the room, making his way to the far side, where a small but important detail could be seen. Maya's lips trembled slightly, but she remained silent, staring ahead as though waiting for something to happen. Judge Roberts leaned forward in his chair. He could no longer ignore the strange sense of unease that had settled over him. His eyes followed Sparky as the dog, now standing by a door at the back of the courtroom, seemed to look toward the prosecutor's desk. He wasn't sure what he was seeing, but something didn't feel right. He shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat again. Maya, he said slowly, trying to regain control, are you sure there's nothing else you want to tell the court? The room held its breath, and Maya took a deep, steadying breath before speaking. I want to go home, she said. I want to stay where I'm safe. A hush fell over the courtroom. It wasn't just what she said, but the way she said it, so calmly, so deliberately. Maya wasn't just a child in this case. She was someone who understood the weight of what was happening, someone who knew how to stand firm in the face of overwhelming odds. Just as the judge was about to speak again, something strange happened. Sparky, having returned to Maya's side, sat down suddenly, as though he had just completed some unseen task. He looked toward the Andersons, his expression unreadable. The room seemed to grow even quieter, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something, anything, to break the tension. It was in that moment that Judge Roberts began to realize, this wasn't just a custody battle anymore. This was something more. A child with a dog who seemed to understand her every move, a foster family caught in the crossfire of a battle they never expected, and a wealthy family with a history of control and secrecy. The pieces were all there. Something was about to unravel, and the courtroom had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. "Miss Maya," the judge said, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "I believe we may need to take a short recess." The gavel fell, but the weight of the moment lingered in the air. As Maya sat back in her seat, her small frame leaning slightly against Sparky, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. She had done it. She had given the first clue. And soon, the world would know. It wasn't just about the custody battle anymore. It was about exposing the truth, no matter how dangerous it might be. And Sparky, her faithful companion, would be there with her every step of the way. As the courtroom emptied for the recess, the whispers began. The Andersons exchanged uneasy glances. The Foster family sat in stunned silence. And Maya, the little girl who had just made a quiet, secret signal to her dog, knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Maya's life had never been easy, but the moments she shared with Sparky were the only things that ever made her feel like she truly belonged. A small, dark-skinned girl with tightly curled hair that bounced as she walked, Maya wasn't the kind of child you'd notice right away. She was often quiet, blending into the background, her wide eyes taking in everything around her. But that didn't mean she wasn't paying attention. Maya observed the world with a sharpness that many adults could never match, and Sparky was her closest confidant, her silent protector. Born to parents who had struggled to make ends meet, Maya had lost them too soon. They had been in a car accident when she was just 5, and though she was too young to understand the full weight of their loss, the absence of their love haunted her every day. She had lived with relatives briefly, but after a series of misunderstandings and the sheer difficulty of being a child in a world that felt like it was against her, Maya ended up in the foster care system. Her first foster home was far from ideal. There was love, of course, love from the couple who had agreed to take her in. But it was strained. Maya's foster mother, Julie, had her own issues to deal with, including a difficult marriage and financial struggles. Julie tried her best, but there were times when Maya could feel the tension in the air, a heaviness that made the house feel more like a place to survive than a place to thrive. There were nights when Maya would lie awake, listening to the sound of arguing through the thin walls, and the silence that followed made her stomach twist. And that's when Sparky came into her life. At first, he had been just a puppy, a small, scrappy thing that had been abandoned on the side of the road. But when Julie had found him, the little dog had changed everything. Sparky was the first true friend Maya had ever had, the first being who didn't judge her or expect her to be anything other than herself. He had a calm, knowing presence that made Maya feel safe, even when the world around her felt unsafe. It was on one of those nights, when Julie and her husband had fought once again, that Sparky had pulled at Maya's sleeve, as if to say, "Come with me." Maya had followed him out of the house, through the backyard, and into the small patch of woods behind the property. There, she sat on the ground, Sparky curled up beside her. She couldn't explain why, but that night had been the first time she had truly felt at peace. There were no arguments, no harsh words, just the comforting sound of Sparky's breathing and the rustling of leaves in the wind. When Julie and her husband finally separated, Maya moved to a new foster family. They were kind-hearted, welcoming, and gave her the space to grow. The Thompsons, a couple who had no children of their own, had wanted to give a home to a child who needed one. It wasn't perfect, but it was the closest thing to a real family that Maya had ever known. They had been the ones to encourage her to speak up in court, to make her voice heard. But even with their love, there was a piece of Maya that felt detached. A piece that only Sparky could fill. Sparky wasn't just a dog to Maya. He was a part of her, a symbol of everything she had fought for, everything she had survived. There were times when he seemed to understand her better than anyone else. When she cried, Sparky was there to nuzzle her gently. When she was scared, he would stay close, his presence offering silent reassurance. But Sparky was more than just comfort. He was a lifeline, something she could trust when everything else felt uncertain. As she sat in the courtroom that morning, with Sparky by her side, Maya couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision that lay ahead. She knew the Andersons, rich, influential, and powerful, were trying to take her away from the Thompsons. They had resources, connections, and everything that could sway the decision in their favor. They seemed like the perfect family for a little girl like her. But Maya didn't care about wealth. She didn't care about fancy houses or vacations. She cared about safety, about love, and most importantly, about Sparky. She remembered the look on Mr. Anderson's face as he had stood up in court, his cold eyes fixed on her. His polished suit, his carefully chosen words, they were all part of the same act. Maya knew he wasn't interested in her happiness. He was interested in ownership, in control. She glanced down at Sparky, who sat quietly by her side, his golden coat gleaming in the sunlight that filtered through the tall courtroom windows. He seemed to sense her unease, his head tilting slightly as if to say, "Don't worry. We'll figure this out." Maya gave him a small, reassuring smile, and for a moment, she felt as though everything would be okay. They had been through so much together. They had always figured it out. Her lawyer, Mr. Harris, leaned in toward her, his voice low but encouraging. "You're doing great, Maya. Just keep being honest. Tell the truth." Maya nodded, though her stomach churned. She didn't know how much longer she could keep up the facade. She had to be strong, for herself and for Sparky. The truth was on her side, but in a world where money and power seemed to rule, she wasn't sure if that would be enough. Outside the courtroom, the world felt like a giant, overwhelming force. Inside, however, Maya felt strangely calm. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain: Sparky would be by her side, and together, they could face whatever came next. As the judge called the next witness to the stand, Maya stole another glance at Sparky, who sat so still it was as though he were waiting for something, waiting for the right moment to make a move. Maya didn't know what that move would be, but she trusted him. And as long as they had each other, she felt like she could take on the world. The trial was just beginning, but Maya knew that this was the moment when everything would change. She wasn't just fighting for her future, she was fighting for the truth. And with Sparky by her side, there was no force in the world that could stop her. The courtroom felt like a battlefield, the air thick with tension as Maya sat on the witness stand, her hands gripping the edges of the chair. Every now and then, her gaze would flick to Sparky, still lying quietly beside her, as if sensing the weight of the moment. He was her rock. Without him, she wasn't sure she could face what was coming. The Andersons sat on the other side, their lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, a tall man with sharp features and a voice that could command a room, stood up to address the judge. "Your Honor," he began, his voice smooth and deliberate, "we understand the emotional attachment that Maya has to her foster family. However, we must stress the fact that she would benefit far more from the stability, the education, and the opportunities that the Andersons can provide." He gestured to the Andersons, who looked every bit the part of a well-to-do family, neatly dressed, hair meticulously styled, their faces betraying nothing but a polished calm. The wife, Mrs. Anderson, smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. She was all business. There was something about her that sent a chill down Maya's spine. "I don't need money or a big house," Maya blurted out, her voice breaking the silence in the room. "I just need to be safe. I just need to be with people who love me." The words had come out before she could stop them, but as soon as they left her lips, she knew she had spoken the truth. Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she glanced over at Sparky. He was still lying there, calm and composed, as though everything in the world was perfectly fine. But Maya could feel the storm brewing around her. She was beginning to realize that her words alone might not be enough to convince anyone. "Your Honor," Mr. Caldwell continued, unfazed by Maya's outburst, "I understand that Maya is a young girl with a limited understanding of the complexities of this case, but it's clear that her emotional state is being manipulated. The Thompsons are lovely people, no doubt. But they simply cannot offer her the future that we can." Maya's heart sank as he spoke. She had heard it all before, how the Andersons could give her everything, how they could provide her with a life of luxury, education, and opportunities beyond her wildest dreams. But what good were all those things if they didn't come with love? It was as if a switch had been flipped inside Maya. The quiet, anxious child who had been holding her breath now felt the sting of betrayal. She had been taught to trust adults, teachers, social workers, even the Thompsons, who had been kind to her. But now, in this moment, with the Andersons and their lawyer spinning their webs of persuasion, Maya realized that she could no longer trust anyone without question. The room was silent as Judge Roberts leaned forward, his gaze moving from Maya to the Andersons and back. He was no fool. He could see the undercurrents of tension that ran beneath the surface of this case. But as a judge, it was his job to remain neutral, to consider the evidence before him and make a decision based on what was best for Maya. The only problem was, there was no clear answer. No matter which way the case turned, someone would lose, and Maya would have to live with the consequences. "Miss Maya," Judge Roberts said, his voice softer than it had been before, "I understand that this is difficult for you. I know that you want what's best for yourself, but sometimes, we have to make choices that are hard. Do you understand?" Maya nodded, though her throat felt tight. She wanted to scream that she didn't want to make a choice. She wanted to stay with the Thompsons, the people who made her feel safe, who loved her as if she were their own. But she couldn't say that out loud. The Andersons had all the power, and Maya didn't know how to fight back. Suddenly, Sparky shifted, raising his head and looking directly at her, his golden eyes locking onto hers. Maya felt a jolt run through her, as if the dog were sending her a silent message. It was as though he knew exactly what she was feeling, how lost and confused she was. She stared back at him for a moment, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, before she took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. She wasn't going to let the Andersons win. She wasn't going to let them take her away from the only family she had ever known. "Your Honor," Maya said, her voice shaking but growing steadier with each word, "I understand that I'm just a little girl. But I know what it's like to feel alone, to feel like no one cares. The Thompsons, they love me. They care about me. They've given me a place to call home. And Sparky, he's my family too. He's the only one who's always been there for me. I don't need anything else. I just want to be with people who love me." There was a long pause, and for a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Even Mr. Caldwell, who had been so confident in his arguments, was taken aback by the raw honesty in Maya's voice. The Andersons, too, were silent. Mrs. Anderson's previously composed face now showed a hint of frustration, while Mr. Anderson stared at Maya with something that almost looked like disdain. But it didn't matter. Maya had said what she needed to say. And now, all she could do was wait. Judge Roberts took a moment to absorb her words. "Thank you, Miss Maya," he said softly. "I can see that you're very clear about what you want. But this isn't just about what you want, it's about what's best for you. And I will take everything you've said into consideration as we move forward." The gavel struck again, signaling the end of the day's proceedings. But as the room began to empty, Maya felt a strange sense of uncertainty settle in. She had made her case, but was it enough? Would the judge truly understand the depth of her connection with Sparky, with her foster family? Or would the weight of the Andersons' power and influence tip the scales in their favor? As she stood up, Sparky moved to her side, and she felt his comforting presence beside her. His steady gaze told her everything she needed to know. No matter what happened next, they were in this together. Maya didn't sleep much that night. The darkness of the room wrapped around her like a heavy blanket, but it couldn't suffocate her thoughts. The sound of Sparky's gentle breathing filled the silence, the only comfort she had in a world that was suddenly spinning out of control. She lay still, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with thoughts of what the next day would bring. Would the judge believe her? Would she be forced to leave the Thompsons? Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder of how fragile her life had become in that courtroom. She tried to picture her future with the Andersons, wealthy, polished, perfect, but every image was tainted with the same sense of emptiness that had gnawed at her heart ever since she lost her parents. She didn't want the luxury they promised. She wanted love, connection, and above all, safety. The Thompsons gave her that. She didn't care about money. She didn't care about fancy vacations or the right kind of education. What mattered was being in a place where she didn't feel like a burden, where she was wanted. The morning light broke through her window, casting soft shadows across the room. Sparky stirred, his ears flicking in response to the quiet stirrings of the house. He looked at Maya with those knowing eyes, as though to remind her that they were in this together. "I'm scared, Sparky," Maya whispered, her voice barely a murmur. "What if I lose everything? What if they take me away?" Sparky padded over to the edge of her bed, his small body curling up beside her as though offering comfort in the only way he knew how. Maya reached out to pet him, the softness of his fur grounding her. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking in his presence like a lifeline. "Whatever happens," she said, her voice steadying, "we'll figure it out. Together." As the day of the trial continued, Maya couldn't shake the tension in the air. It felt as though the world was holding its breath. The court was packed, more crowded than it had been the day before. News outlets had picked up on the case, some highlighting the fight between the Andersons, who had the financial means to offer a better future for Maya, and the Thompsons, who were simply a couple willing to love her like their own. Maya felt the eyes of the courtroom on her as she walked in, her hands clutching Sparky's leash, her fingers pressing against his fur for the warmth and reassurance she desperately needed. She felt small in the vastness of the room, but Sparky was always there, never far from her side. "Don't worry, Maya," Mr. Harris, her lawyer, whispered as he passed her a reassuring smile. "You did well yesterday. Just keep telling the truth. That's all we can do." Maya nodded, trying to swallow the lump that formed in her throat. She glanced at the Andersons, seated on the other side of the room. Mr. Anderson was speaking with his lawyer, his face tight with frustration. Mrs. Anderson, too, was whispering something to her attorney, her gaze flickering briefly toward Maya before turning away. Maya couldn't help but feel a spark of defiance rise within her. She would not be intimidated by them, no matter how much power they had. But then, as the judge entered the room and the trial resumed, a new figure caught Maya's attention, a figure that brought a wave of unease crashing over her. A woman with bright blonde hair, neatly pulled back into a tight ponytail, stood up from the back of the courtroom. She was dressed in a business suit, sharp and professional, and her cold, calculating eyes swept across the room as she made her way to the front. Maya's stomach twisted into knots as she realized that this woman was not here as a witness, but as a new player in the game, the Andersons' private investigator. The woman's name was Karen Harris, but Maya knew there was nothing friendly about her. She'd seen Karen before, lurking in the background of the courtroom, sitting quietly while the Andersons made their case. Maya didn't know what role she had played, but she felt a creeping sense of dread whenever Karen's cold gaze landed on her. As Karen approached, she glanced at Maya, her lips curling into a small, almost amused smile. "So this is the girl," she murmured, loud enough for Maya to hear. "The one who thinks she can stop the Andersons from getting what they want." Maya tensed, but she didn't back down. She met Karen's eyes with a defiant stare, her chest rising and falling with each breath. "I'm not stopping anyone. I'm just fighting for my life." Karen's smile faded, replaced by a look of pure disdain. She turned away from Maya without another word and approached the judge's bench, whispering something into the judge's ear. Maya didn't know what they were discussing, but she felt the cold weight of the conversation settle over her. She wasn't sure what to make of it. Was Karen trying to influence the trial? Was she working behind the scenes to turn things in the Andersons' favor? Before Maya could dwell on it any longer, Mr. Caldwell stood up and called the next witness to the stand, Maya's foster mother, Julie Thompson. Julie stepped up with a hesitant smile, adjusting her glasses nervously as she walked past the stand. Maya could see the anxiety written all over her face. Julie was not used to being in the spotlight, and she had a soft, introverted nature that made the courtroom feel even more intimidating. Maya's heart ached as she saw the stress lines on Julie's face. Her foster mother was a kind and loving woman, but she didn't have the experience or the resources to fight the Andersons head-on. "Mrs. Thompson," Mr. Caldwell began, his voice oozing with calculated politeness, "tell us about Maya's life here in your home." Julie took a breath, glancing over at Maya, who gave her a small nod. She began to speak, her voice gentle but firm. "Maya is a sweet girl," Julie said, her hands clasped in front of her. "She's been with us for 2 years now, and in that time, she's become part of our family. We've made sure she has everything she needs, from a stable environment to the love and support she deserves." The warmth in Julie's voice was undeniable, but Maya couldn't help but notice the doubt that flashed in her eyes. Julie's words were true, but would they be enough? Would the judge see that the Thompsons could offer Maya the stability and love she needed, or would the Andersons' wealth and connections prove to be too strong of an influence? Maya's heart beat faster as she realized just how much was riding on these moments. Everything was out of her hands now. But as she glanced at Sparky, lying patiently at her feet, Maya reminded herself of one simple truth: no matter what happened, she wasn't alone. The tension in the courtroom thickened as the afternoon wore on. Maya could barely keep her hands from trembling as she sat in the witness stand, trying to remain calm under the weight of the judgment she knew was looming over her. Sparky sat beside her, his small body curled up tightly, his steady gaze offering her a strange kind of solace. He was her anchor, her constant in a sea of uncertainty. Julie Thompson, Maya's foster mother, had just finished her testimony. The courtroom seemed to buzz with the weight of her words, each one reinforcing what Maya already knew in her heart: Julie loved her. She was a good mother in every sense that mattered. But despite the love in Julie's voice and the warmth of her words, Maya felt an uneasy gnaw at her. Julie's quiet demeanor wasn't going to be enough against the Andersons' polished lawyer and the mounting pressure from Karen Harris. As the court adjourned for a short break, Maya's eyes wandered toward the back of the room, where she could see the Andersons huddling with their lawyer. Mr. Caldwell was speaking in low tones to both Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, his face tight with frustration. Karen Harris was beside them, her presence commanding as she observed the proceedings with a cold, calculating gaze. The Andersons hadn't said much during the trial, but they didn't need to. Their wealth, their status, their perfect image, everything about them screamed that they were the ideal parents for Maya. And yet, all Maya could think about was the emptiness in their eyes. She couldn't picture herself in their world. Not in a million years. "Do you think they'll win?" Maya's voice was barely a whisper, but she knew Julie had heard it. Julie sat beside her, her face pale but resolute. "I don't know, sweetie," she admitted, her voice soft. "But we're not giving up. You and Sparky are part of this family, and no matter what happens, we're going to fight for you." Maya's heart swelled with gratitude for Julie's unwavering support, but doubt crept in. The Andersons had the law, the money, the connections. Julie had nothing but the love she could offer. Was it enough? Before Maya could dwell on these thoughts, Mr. Harris, her lawyer, approached with a comforting smile. He was a calm presence in the chaos, always ready to reassure her when the weight of the situation felt unbearable. "Maya," he said, crouching beside her. "I know this has been hard, but we're almost there. You did great today. Just keep your composure, and remember, you have every right to be here, to be heard." Maya nodded, but she wasn't sure she believed him. She couldn't shake the feeling that the fight was slipping from her grasp. That somehow, she wasn't enough. A few minutes later, the gavel struck once more, and the room fell silent. Judge Roberts entered, his solemn presence filling the room. It was time to continue. "Mr. Caldwell, you may call your next witness," Judge Roberts said, his voice ringing through the courtroom. Maya's stomach twisted. She hadn't expected this to happen so soon, but there it was, the final stretch. She could feel it in the air, the way everyone's eyes were on her, waiting for the next piece to fall into place. Mr. Caldwell stood and walked to the front, his briefcase in hand. He glanced at Maya before turning to the judge. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "we have one more witness to call. A character witness to speak on behalf of the Andersons, a woman who has known them for many years." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what kind of character witness this would be, but she could already tell by the look on Mr. Caldwell's face that this was going to be important. The door at the back of the courtroom opened, and in walked a woman Maya had never seen before. She was tall, with sharp features and blonde hair that fell in waves down her back. Her face was cold, almost unnervingly so, and her eyes scanned the room with a sense of ownership, as though she had walked into a space that was rightfully hers. Maya could feel her unease rise, a shiver creeping up her spine. There was something about this woman's presence that unsettled her, but before she could place her feelings, the woman was introduced to the court. "This is Karen Harris," Mr. Caldwell said, his voice smooth. "She is a close friend of the Anderson family and has known them for over 10 years. She has seen firsthand the kind of life they lead, the kind of parents they are." Maya's stomach clenched. So Karen was more than just a private investigator. She was an insider, someone who knew how to play the game. Karen walked to the stand, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. She sat down and gave the judge a practiced smile, her demeanor poised and confident. "Ms. Harris," Judge Roberts said, his voice calm but authoritative, "please tell us what you know about the Andersons and their ability to care for Maya." Karen's eyes flicked to Maya, a small, almost smug smile curling on her lips. "The Andersons are good people, Your Honor," she began. "They've always been involved in charitable work, supporting schools, shelters, and youth programs. They've created a stable, loving home for their children, and I've personally seen how they care for the children they take in." Her words were smooth, rehearsed. She painted a picture of the Andersons as the perfect couple, the kind of parents that everyone would want. The words made Maya's heart sink further. This was the kind of testimony that could sway the judge. The kind of testimony that could take everything she had fought for. They have the resources, the support system, the time and energy to raise a child like Maya in the best possible environment, Karen continued, her voice sweet but piercing. "I have no doubt that Maya would thrive in their home. She would be given every opportunity to succeed." Maya felt a knot tighten in her chest as Karen spoke. There was no mention of love, no mention of the emotional connection between Maya and her foster family. It was all about the Andersons' image, polished, perfect, and just the kind of family society valued. The kind of family that was capable of giving Maya everything she didn't need. She glanced at Julie, who was looking down at her hands, her eyes brimming with unspoken fear. Julie knew that this testimony was the turning point. And she knew there was little she could do about it. But then, as Karen's testimony went on, something unexpected happened. Maya looked down at Sparky, whose eyes met hers, and suddenly, in that moment, everything else fell away. The polished words, the fake smiles, it all seemed insignificant compared to the love and loyalty she felt toward this little dog. I'm not alone, Maya thought. I have Sparky. I have Julie. I have my own voice. And I'm not giving up. The courtroom's noise faded as Maya's heart steadied, and she prepared for what was next. She wasn't going to let them take her without a fight. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Maya could feel her heart racing in her chest as Karen Harris finished her testimony. The way Karen had spoken about the Andersons, so perfectly polished, so poised, made Maya feel like an outsider in a world where money and status ruled everything. She glanced at the Andersons, seated on the opposite side of the room, and saw Mr. Anderson's approving nod toward Karen as she returned to her seat. It was as though Karen's testimony had sealed the deal. The Andersons seemed so perfect. They were the picture of the ideal family. The rich, successful couple with the ability to give Maya everything she needed. The thought sent a chill through Maya's spine. But Julie's eyes met hers across the room. A look passed between them, and in that fleeting moment, Maya could see the unspoken support in her foster mother's gaze. Julie was terrified, Maya could feel it, but she wouldn't give up without a fight. And neither would Maya. Ms. Harris, Judge Roberts said, his voice steady but sharp, "Thank you for your testimony. We will now take a brief recess before the closing statements." As the gavel struck, signaling a break in the proceedings, Maya's body sagged with relief. She couldn't take any more of this. The words, the polished rhetoric, the way everything felt like it was slipping through her fingers, it was too much. Julie rose from her seat, her hands trembling slightly as she made her way over to Maya. "How are you holding up?" she asked softly, her voice full of concern. Maya forced a smile, but it felt weak and hollow. "I'm okay, I think. I don't know how I'm going to compete with that." Julie shook her head gently. "You're not supposed to compete with them, Maya. You're here because you deserve to be. Don't forget that." Maya nodded, though doubt still clouded her mind. The Andersons had everything. They had money, power, connections. But she had love. She had Julie. And she had Sparky. Was that enough? Sparky, sensing Maya's turmoil, trotted over and nuzzled her hand. Maya laughed softly despite herself, her heart lightening just a little. He was always there, the one constant in her life, the one who never judged her, never expected anything from her except love. But as the recess came to an end and everyone returned to their seats, the air grew thick again. It was time for the closing statements. Mr. Caldwell stood first, his sharp voice filling the room. "Your Honor, we have shown you today that the Andersons are the most suitable parents for Maya. They have the resources, the support system, and the unwavering dedication to providing her with the best possible future. They have already made a place for her in their home, and we believe that Maya will thrive in their care." His words seemed rehearsed, a flawless performance that was meant to sway the judge. Maya couldn't help but feel like they weren't even talking about her anymore. It was just another case, another transaction in a world where children were nothing more than commodities. The words stung, but Maya refused to let them break her. She turned to Julie, whose face was filled with quiet determination. Julie had been her rock through this entire process, and Maya wasn't about to let her down now. When Mr. Caldwell finished, the courtroom fell into a heavy silence. It was time for Maya's lawyer, Mr. Harris, to make their case. He stood up, adjusting his glasses before looking directly at the judge. "Your Honor," Mr. Harris began, his voice calm and steady, "we've heard today about the wealth and stability the Andersons can offer. And while those things are important, they are not everything. What is most important is the emotional bond that a child shares with their caregivers. Maya has been with the Thompsons for over 2 years. They are her family. Julie Thompson has provided a loving and stable home for Maya, and despite their financial limitations, she has given Maya something more valuable than money, she has given her unconditional love and care. Maya felt a swell of warmth in her chest. Mr. Harris continued, speaking passionately about Julie and Maya's relationship, emphasizing that it was the emotional connection, not the financial one, that truly mattered in a child's well-being. Maya's happiness, her sense of safety and belonging, these things cannot be measured in dollars. They are felt in the heart. And Maya has felt that love and support every single day in the Thompson household. The Andersons may offer her wealth and prestige, but they cannot offer her the love that has kept her safe and grounded for the past 2 years. That is why Maya belongs with the Thompsons. Not because they have the most money, but because they have the most love to give. Maya could feel the weight of Mr. Harris's words, and for the first time since the trial began, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance that the judge would see the truth. Maybe love really was enough. When Mr. Harris finished, Maya's heart pounded in her chest. The room was silent, but the air was thick with anticipation. The judge didn't immediately speak, he simply sat there, his expression unreadable. Maya could feel her breath catch in her throat as she waited for him to make his decision. But just as the tension reached its peak, something unexpected happened. Maya's eyes flicked toward the back of the room. There, standing by the doors, was Karen Harris. She was talking quietly with someone Maya hadn't seen before. The man was tall, with broad shoulders, wearing a dark suit. He didn't belong in the courtroom, at least not in the way everyone else did. He had an aura of danger around him, as though he were someone who could manipulate things with just a look. Maya's stomach dropped. Who was this man? And why was Karen talking to him now, just as the trial was coming to a close? Before Maya could process what she had just seen, the judge spoke. "I have heard enough," Judge Roberts said, his voice firm. "I will deliberate on this matter and provide my ruling shortly." The gavel came down with a sharp bang, signaling the end of the day's proceedings. The courtroom slowly began to empty, but Maya stayed rooted to her seat, her mind spinning. The mystery man. Karen's secret conversation. What did it all mean? As Maya stood up and walked out of the courtroom with Julie and Sparky at her side, a sense of unease settled in her gut. The battle wasn't over yet. In fact, it was just beginning. The air in the courtroom was thick with anticipation as Maya, Julie, and Sparky left the courthouse. The day's proceedings had ended, but Maya couldn't shake the unease that gnawed at her insides. The mysterious man in the back of the room and Karen's secret conversation played over and over in her mind. What was going on? Why had Karen been speaking with someone who didn't seem to belong? Julie walked beside her, her usual calm demeanor cracked slightly by the weight of everything they had just been through. "Maya, I know it feels overwhelming right now," she said softly, "but we've done everything we can. The rest is up to the judge." Maya nodded, trying to force a smile, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the man in the conversation. Who was he? What did he have to do with all this? Was there something more to the Andersons' case than she knew? "Julie," Maya began, her voice quiet, "did you see that man in the courtroom? The one talking to Karen? He didn't seem like he belonged." Julie stopped walking and turned to Maya, her brow furrowing in confusion. "What man?" "The one near the door," Maya explained. "The tall one in the dark suit. He was standing next to Karen, and they were talking in hushed voices right after the closing statements. It just seemed off." Julie hesitated for a moment, her face pale. "I didn't see anyone like that," she said, though Maya could tell she was trying to mask her own concern. "But it could be someone involved with the Andersons. They have a lot of influence, and they can make connections. Maybe they're just preparing something behind the scenes." Maya wasn't convinced. She felt that something was amiss, and a growing sense of dread settled in her chest. She didn't know what that man's presence meant, but it felt like the calm before the storm. The trio made their way to the car, and as Julie drove them home, Maya's mind raced. She tried to focus on the comforting feeling of Sparky curled up in her lap, but even the little dog's presence couldn't distract her. The mystery man and Karen's strange conversation hovered over everything, and no matter how much she tried to push it aside, the questions kept bubbling up. When they arrived home, the house felt oddly quiet. It wasn't the usual warm, comforting atmosphere Maya had come to love. There was an odd stillness in the air, like something was waiting to happen. Julie seemed tense, too. As soon as they entered the house, she turned to Maya, her face filled with a quiet urgency. "I need to talk to you, sweetheart. There's something I haven't told you," Julie said, her voice trembling ever so slightly. Maya's heart skipped a beat. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" Julie sighed and sat down on the couch, motioning for Maya to join her. Sparky jumped off her lap and trotted to his favorite spot on the rug. Julie took a deep breath before she spoke. "Maya, I've been doing some digging. I know you've been worried about what's going on with the Andersons, and I think I've uncovered something. Something that's been kept from you." Maya's stomach clenched. "What do you mean?" "I didn't want to tell you before because I didn't want to worry you, but now I think it's time you knew the truth. The Andersons, Karen Harris, especially, have a history that goes way back. And it's not as perfect as they want everyone to believe." Maya sat down next to Julie, her mind reeling. "What history?" Julie's eyes flickered to the floor, as if weighing whether to continue. "I've been looking into Karen's past, and I found some things that don't add up. She was involved in a few shady situations, nothing criminal, but definitely not what she lets people think. And there's something even bigger at play here, Maya." Maya's breath caught. "What are you saying? Is Karen trying to take me away from you?" Julie nodded slowly. "I think Karen and the Andersons have something planned. They want you, Maya, not because they're the perfect parents, but because they see you as a pawn in a bigger game. I don't know the whole story yet, but I think Karen's been using her connections to manipulate things. The man you saw in the courtroom, he's connected to all of this." Maya's head was spinning. "But, why me? Why would they want me if they don't care about me?" Julie's eyes were filled with regret as she reached out and took Maya's hand. "I don't know yet. But we're going to figure it out together. I won't let anyone take you away from me. We're in this together, no matter what." Maya felt a sense of relief wash over her, though the mystery of it all still weighed heavily on her mind. Julie had always been there for her, always been the one to protect her. But now, there were shadows hanging over their lives, shadows that Maya wasn't sure how to face. The next morning, as the sun rose, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that the trial was far from over. Karen's involvement in everything felt deeper than she had imagined. There were too many unanswered questions, too many things that didn't make sense. The Andersons, Karen, and the mysterious man, Maya felt like she was standing in the middle of a puzzle, and the pieces were slowly falling into place. But before she could fully process what Julie had revealed, they were faced with something even more unexpected. The doorbell rang, cutting through the heavy silence of the house. Julie's face went pale as she stood up, her eyes flickering toward the door. "Stay here, Maya. I'll see who it is." Maya nodded, but her heart was racing. She knew something was wrong. The unexpected visitor couldn't be good news. Julie opened the door, and Maya's curiosity got the best of her. She crept quietly toward the hallway, just enough to hear the muffled voices outside. She couldn't make out the words, but she could tell by the tension in Julie's voice that this wasn't a friendly visit. A moment later, Julie came back inside, her face tight with worry. "Maya," she said softly, "we need to leave. Now." Maya's heart pounded. "What's going on? Who was it?" "It was the police. They've issued a temporary restraining order against you, against me. They say we can't leave the state, and they've started an investigation. The Andersons are pushing for custody, and they've got the law on their side." Maya's world came crashing down. This was no longer just about a courtroom. It was a battle for her very future. And as the weight of it all sank in, one thing became clear to Maya: nothing would stop her from fighting for the family she loved. The room was quiet as Maya sat down on the couch, her hands shaking in her lap. Julie had already started packing a small bag, her movements hurried but controlled. Maya felt like the walls were closing in on her. The weight of the restraining order was heavy on her shoulders, but it was the knowledge that the Andersons had the law on their side that made her stomach churn. Julie looked over at Maya, her face tight with worry. "Maya, we have to stay calm. We have to think this through." Maya nodded, though her heart was racing. "But how? They've already got the police involved. And we can't leave the state. How are we supposed to fight this?" Julie's eyes softened as she walked over to Maya, sitting beside her. "We're not alone, okay? We have each other. And we have people who care about us, people who can help us figure this out." Maya tried to steady her breathing, but the truth hung heavy in the air. It felt like everything was spiraling out of control, and she had no idea where to turn next. The Andersons had the money, the power, the connections. What did Julie and Maya have? A dog and a dream. But Julie's voice was strong, unwavering. "I won't let them take you, Maya. I promise. But we need to make sure we're not making any hasty decisions. We need to think strategically. Let's go over our options and see how we can fight this. We're going to take this one step at a time." Maya glanced at Sparky, who was now curled up beside her, his little tail wagging like he could sense the tension in the room. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel a spark of hope. Sparky had always been there for her, through thick and thin. Maybe together, they could find a way out of this. The knock on the door broke the silence, and both of them froze. Julie's eyes widened. "That can't be the police again, right?" Maya held her breath as Julie made her way cautiously to the door. She opened it a crack, peering outside, and then her expression shifted from worry to shock. "Maya," Julie whispered, her voice trembling, "it's Mr. Harris." Maya's heart skipped a beat. Mr. Harris, her lawyer. He had been so instrumental in her case, but why was he here, especially now? Julie stepped aside to let him in. He was dressed in his usual business suit, his tie slightly loosened, but his face was more serious than usual. As he walked into the living room, Julie closed the door behind him and locked it, as if somehow the simple act could keep the world from crashing in. "Mr. Harris," Maya said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "What's going on?" "The police, they just showed up at our door. They told us we can't leave the state, and the Andersons are pushing for custody." Mr. Harris rubbed his temples, a deep sigh escaping him. "I know, Maya. I know. It's a lot to process, but listen, we have to stay calm. There's something I need to tell you, something I've just found out." Julie and Maya exchanged worried glances. Mr. Harris continued, his voice steady but urgent. "I've been looking into the Andersons, trying to understand their motives a bit better. And I found something that could change everything." "What do you mean?" Julie asked, her voice tight with fear. "What did you find?" Mr. Harris hesitated for a moment, glancing over his shoulder as if to make sure they weren't being watched. "It's about the man you saw in the courtroom, Maya, the one talking to Karen. His name is Henry Monroe. He's an attorney with a very powerful law firm, one that specializes in child custody cases. The Andersons hired him, and he's been working with them for months, gathering information and building a case." Maya's stomach twisted. "So they've been planning this for months?" "Yes," Mr. Harris said. "But that's not the worst part. Karen Harris and the Andersons are tied to a series of legal maneuvers that go beyond just this custody case. They've been involved in several similar cases before, where they've used their connections to gain control of children for reasons that aren't entirely above board." Julie's face turned pale. "You mean they're not just trying to adopt Maya because they care about her?" There's something else going on here. Mr. Harris nodded grimly. Exactly. I can't say for certain what their endgame is yet, but I believe they've been using Maya as part of a larger plan. And the restraining order, that's just the beginning. They'll stop at nothing to get what they want. The weight of his words hit Maya like a physical blow. She'd always known that the Andersons seemed too perfect, too polished. But now, it was clear, they were hiding something. Something dangerous. And Maya was in the middle of it all. What do we do now? Maya asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mr. Harris looked at her, his expression softening. We fight. We gather evidence. We go on the offense. I've already reached out to a few people who can help us. But we need to move quickly, Maya. Time is not on our side. The Andersons are powerful, and they'll use every trick in the book to make sure they win. Julie stood up and walked over to the window, looking out with a determined expression. We won't give up, not without a fight. If they want Maya, they'll have to go through me first. Maya felt a surge of gratitude. She had always known that Julie would fight for her, but hearing it now made her heart swell with hope. They weren't in this alone, not anymore. As the night stretched on, the three of them made a plan. Mr. Harris would work behind the scenes to gather legal evidence and investigate the Andersons' past. Julie would keep her eyes open for anything suspicious, and Maya would do what she could to document her own life, her experiences, and her relationship with Julie. They would need everything they could get to fight back. But there was one thing Maya couldn't shake, the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. The Andersons had power, and they weren't afraid to use it. And as much as Maya wanted to believe that love would be enough to win, she knew the fight ahead would test them all in ways they couldn't yet understand. As they finished their plan and prepared for the next steps, Maya couldn't help but wonder, what would happen if they lost? Would she lose Julie? Would she be forced into the arms of strangers who didn't care for her the way Julie did? But she pushed those thoughts aside. They had a plan. And as long as she had Julie, and Sparky, by her side, she would keep fighting. No matter what. The morning after their meeting with Mr. Harris, Maya woke up with a sense of dread that she couldn't shake. The world outside seemed deceptively calm, as if everything was normal, but Maya knew that normal was a thing of the past. The Andersons, with their vast resources, had declared war, and she was standing right in the middle of it. Every decision, every move she made now felt like it could tip the scales one way or the other. Julie was already awake when Maya emerged from her bedroom. She was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping a cup of coffee, her eyes clouded with worry. Sparky, as usual, was curled up in his bed by the window, watching the world outside with mild curiosity. Maya, Julie said, glancing up as Maya entered the room. I've been thinking about what Mr. Harris said. I think we need to move faster. The Andersons have the upper hand right now, but that doesn't mean we have to let them win. Maya nodded, still feeling the weight of what Mr. Harris had shared. The Andersons were playing a long game, using their connections and legal strategies to build a case that would take everything from her. She had to do something. She couldn't just sit back and wait for them to take control. I agree, Maya said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. But how do we fight back? We're already up against so much. What if we lose? Julie reached across the table and took Maya's hand, squeezing it firmly. Listen to me, Maya. We're not alone in this. Mr. Harris is a good lawyer, and I've been talking to some people who might be able to help us. We just have to be smart about how we proceed. And remember, we've got Sparky on our side. Maya glanced down at Sparky, who was wagging his tail, as if he knew they needed all the help they could get. I know, Maya said, a small smile tugging at her lips. I guess he's got more fight in him than I give him credit for. Julie smiled back, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. The reality was, this wasn't just about custody anymore, it was about fighting for everything that Maya had come to love. It was about family. And Julie wasn't going to let the Andersons take that away from her. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Both Maya and Julie froze, exchanging a look of alarm. No one had been expected, except, of course, the police. Julie stood up quickly, and as she approached the door, she whispered to Maya, "Stay here. I'll handle it." Maya nodded, heart racing. Her stomach clenched as she watched Julie open the door. For a brief moment, Maya couldn't see who it was, only hear Julie's voice as she greeted the person on the other side. Then, the door opened wider, revealing the last person Maya had expected to see. It was Karen Harris. Maya felt her blood run cold. The woman who had been fighting to take her away from Julie stood there in the doorway, a small, almost sickly smile on her face. Behind her, another man stood, someone Maya didn't recognize, tall with a sharp, calculating look in his eyes. "Maya," Karen said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It's good to see you again. I hope we can have a little chat. May I come in?" Julie stood stiffly, blocking the doorway. "Why are you here, Karen?" she demanded, her voice firm but filled with barely contained fury. Karen's smile didn't falter, though there was a slight edge to her voice as she replied. "I think it's time we clear the air. You've been making this much harder than it needs to be, Julie. Maya belongs with us. And I'm here to make sure she sees that." Maya's heart thudded painfully in her chest. Karen wasn't here for a friendly chat. This was part of her plan. She had come to assert her dominance, to remind Julie who was in control. "I'm not interested in your manipulations, Karen," Julie snapped, her voice growing louder. "And neither is Maya. If you think you can just waltz in here and convince her." "Maya," Karen interrupted, turning her gaze directly on her. Her eyes were icy, but there was a glint of something darker in them. "You've been through a lot, I know. But I'm offering you a chance to live a better life. A life with stability, with people who care for you. People who can give you everything you need, unlike Julie." The words cut through Maya like a knife. She had heard these lies before, but now they felt even more hollow, more sinister. Julie moved to step forward, but Maya grabbed her arm, her voice quiet but resolute. "I'm not going with you, Karen. I don't want your better life. I have everything I need right here. With Julie. With Sparky. You can't take that from me." Karen's smile faltered, just for a moment, before she regained her composure. "We'll see about that, Maya. You're still just a child, after all. You don't know what's best for you. But soon, you'll understand. You'll see that what I'm offering you is far better than anything Julie can provide." Maya's anger flared, but she pushed it down, focusing on what she knew was true. "I don't need anything from you, Karen. You can't change that." Karen's expression darkened, but instead of responding, she nodded curtly to the man behind her, who stepped forward with a stack of papers. He handed them to Julie without a word. Julie scanned them quickly, her face hardening. "What is this?" Julie asked, her voice cold. "A formal petition for custody," Karen said, her voice dripping with thinly veiled satisfaction. "I've filed with the court. You'll be served in the morning." Julie's face turned pale as she read the papers. Maya felt a lump form in her throat as she read over Julie's shoulder. The words jumped out at her, words that made everything feel more real, more imminent. The Andersons weren't just fighting for custody. They were pulling every string they could to make it happen. "Consider this your warning," Karen said with a sickening smile. "You'll need to get your affairs in order. You don't have much time." Without another word, Karen and her associate turned and walked out, leaving Maya and Julie standing in the doorway, the weight of their threats hanging heavily in the air. Maya looked up at Julie, her heart breaking. "What do we do now?" Julie exhaled sharply, her voice tight. Now, we fight harder than ever. This is just the beginning, Maya. But I won't let them take you from me. We'll make sure they never get their hands on you. Maya nodded, determined. As much as Karen tried to intimidate them, as much as the Andersons threw their weight around, Maya knew one thing for sure: she wasn't giving up without a fight. She wasn't going to let them steal her life. Julie was her family. And they would do whatever it took to keep it that way. The days following Karen's visit were filled with a sense of urgency and anxiety. Maya could feel it in the air, thick, palpable, suffocating. The custody papers were more than just a piece of paper. They were a weapon, a way for the Andersons to remind them both of how much power they had. But Maya wasn't about to let fear take hold of her. She couldn't. Not when Julie was by her side. The moment the door closed behind them, Julie had been quick to gather her thoughts. We can't let them intimidate us, Maya. They've made their move, but we're not going to roll over. Maya nodded, her resolve hardening. What's the next step? How do we fight this? Julie sat down at the table, her fingers tapping nervously on the surface. We'll need evidence. The more we have to prove that the Andersons are only interested in control, not in taking care of you, the better. Mr. Harris will help, but we also need to keep everything under wraps. No one can know we're getting ready for a fight. Not yet. Maya looked at Sparky, who was lying on the couch, his little eyes following every move she made. The comfort of his presence was a small solace in the whirlwind of chaos, but it was enough to steady her. She didn't know how they were going to win this, but she knew she couldn't back down. Julie stood up, moving toward the window. The sky outside was overcast, dark clouds gathering as if the universe itself was anticipating the storm ahead. We've got to think of a plan to get ahead of them, Julie muttered to herself, her mind racing. I'll go back to the courthouse tomorrow. I need to talk to someone who might know more about the Andersons' legal tactics. Maya's stomach tightened. Julie, what if they're watching us? What if they're already planning something we don't know about? Julie looked at Maya with determination. If they are, we'll be ready for it. We won't make it easy for them, Maya. I won't let them take you from me. And that was the heart of it all. Julie wasn't going to let Maya go, no matter how much the Andersons pushed. But Maya knew that there was more to this battle than just holding on. There was strategy, and there was courage, and together, they would need to summon both. The next morning, Julie left early to visit the courthouse. Maya stayed behind, taking the time to organize her thoughts and make a list of everything they could do to strengthen their case. It wasn't much: photographs, notes, journal entries, but it was a start. She had no idea how long they could keep running from the Andersons, but if this battle was going to be fought, she would be ready. Sparky trotted over to her side, nudging her gently with his nose. Maya smiled softly, running her fingers through his fur. You're all I need, buddy. We'll get through this. The hours dragged by until the sound of the door opening announced Julie's return. She stepped inside with a look of frustration and concern. It's worse than I thought, Maya. The Andersons have connections at every level of this system. The clerk I spoke with, she was barely able to give me any information. But there's something else. Something that could change everything. Maya's heart skipped a beat. What is it? What did you find out? Julie took a deep breath before speaking. It turns out that the Andersons aren't just involved in child custody cases. I ran into someone who knows about their other businesses. They have ties to some powerful people, real estate developers, financiers. It's a tangled web, Maya. And it doesn't seem like they're just after you. They've been using custody battles to manipulate people into giving up property, control, money. Maya felt a sickening knot in her stomach. You mean, they're not just trying to adopt me? They're using me as part of some bigger plan? Julie nodded grimly. Exactly. This isn't just about you. It's about power, control. The Andersons are after more than just custody, they want everything. Maya could barely breathe. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. This was bigger than she'd ever imagined. She'd always known something felt off about the Andersons, but now the pieces were falling into place. They weren't interested in Maya's well-being, they were playing a game, and she was just a pawn. How do we fight this? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. How can we take on people like them? Julie sat beside her, her face hard with determination. We'll use their game against them. We need to gather everything, every scrap of evidence we can. If they've been using these custody cases to manipulate people, we can expose it. We can't just sit back and wait for them to make their next move. We need to be ahead of them. Maya nodded, but the fear in her chest still wouldn't go away. How could they possibly stand up to the Andersons? They had money, influence, and the law on their side. What did they have? A dog and each other. But then she looked at Sparky, sitting at her feet, his tail wagging gently. He was her family, just as much as Julie was. And that was something the Andersons couldn't take away. They could try to break her, try to intimidate her, but as long as Maya had Julie and Sparky, they would never win. We'll need to be smart, Maya said, a fire igniting in her chest. We'll take them down, one step at a time. But we have to be careful. They won't hesitate to play dirty. Julie smiled, though it was a fierce, determined smile. We'll play dirty, too. The next few days were filled with frantic preparation. Julie and Maya scoured through old papers, phone records, and emails, looking for any hint of wrongdoing on the Andersons' part. Every piece of evidence they found only added to the depth of the conspiracy they were uncovering. But they were running out of time. The court date was looming, and with every passing hour, the pressure to find something concrete grew heavier. In the meantime, Maya received an unexpected visit from someone who could change everything, someone who might just be able to expose the Andersons for the frauds they were. It was a friend of Julie's, a private investigator named Ryan, who had been following the Andersons' financial dealings. His information was murky, but it was enough to lead them down a dangerous path. A path that could end everything for the Andersons, or make them an even greater enemy. Julie's phone buzzed as she stepped outside to make a call, her voice tense with urgency. Maya, we need to move now. We're on the clock, and I think we've got something. Maya swallowed hard, her heart pounding. What is it? Julie's voice crackled with excitement. I think we found the key to taking them down. But we have to act fast. If they catch wind of what we're doing, they'll destroy us. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The pressure was mounting. Every minute that passed felt like a countdown, a reminder that the Andersons weren't going to wait for Maya and Julie to get their act together. The time was drawing near for the court hearing, and Maya could feel the walls closing in. It wasn't just about custody anymore, it was about survival. They were fighting against an unstoppable force, and every move they made seemed to attract more danger. Julie had barely slept in the past few days, spending long hours gathering evidence with Ryan, their private investigator. Maya tried to keep things normal for Sparky's sake, but she couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation hanging over her like a dark cloud. The calm, peaceful life they'd worked so hard to build was crumbling before her eyes, and she wasn't sure if there was anything they could do to stop it. Maya, Julie's voice broke through her thoughts as she walked into the kitchen, holding a folder filled with papers. I think we found something. It's not much, but it's a start. Maya stood up, her heart racing. She'd been waiting for this moment, hoping that they'd find something, anything, that would help them expose the Andersons' manipulative tactics. She followed Julie to the table where she spread the papers out in front of them. These are records of a real estate deal the Andersons made with another developer last year, Julie said, her eyes scanning the documents. They used custody cases like yours as leverage to gain access to properties owned by people they've targeted. This could be the break we need. Maya leaned in, her brow furrowing as she examined the papers. The deal seemed suspicious, vague clauses about future investments, promises of family-oriented developments, but nothing solid. It wasn't enough to prove anything on its own, but it was a start. A hint that maybe, just maybe, they were getting close to the truth. I don't understand, Maya said, still processing the information. Why would they use me? Why would they risk everything for something as shady as real estate deals? Julie's expression hardened as she met Maya's gaze. Because, Maya, they don't just want to take you. They want to control everything. The Andersons have been playing this game for years. They get control of people, of families, and then they use that power to manipulate markets, properties, and entire communities. Maya shook her head, feeling sick to her stomach. The thought of being used as a pawn in someone's grand scheme made her blood boil. But why me? Why did they choose us? Julie's eyes softened. I think you were just an easy target. You're young, you're vulnerable. They thought they could walk in and take you without anyone noticing. But they underestimated us, Maya. They underestimated you. Maya's throat tightened as she realized just how much Julie was willing to fight for her. She wasn't just fighting for custody, she was fighting for Maya's future, for her right to live with the people she loved. Maya wasn't just some piece of property to be claimed, she was a person, and she deserved to have her voice heard. We're not going to let them win, Maya said, her voice firm, a sense of resolve settling over her. We're going to expose them. We'll make sure everyone knows what they've been doing. Julie smiled, her eyes filled with pride. That's the spirit. But we have to be careful. We can't make any mistakes now. If they get wind of what we're doing, it could be game over. Maya nodded. The stakes were higher than ever, and one wrong move could destroy everything they had worked for. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She couldn't afford to be. The following days were a blur of meetings, calls, and late-night strategy sessions. Julie and Ryan spent hours combing through the Andersons' financial records, looking for anything that would tie them to the illegal practices they suspected. But as the clock ticked down, the danger of being discovered grew more real with each passing day. On the night before the hearing, Julie sat down with Maya in the living room, a tense silence between them. Sparky lay at their feet, curled up and oblivious to the storm brewing around them. Julie looked exhausted, her eyes red from lack of sleep, but there was a fire in her expression that Maya recognized. Julie wasn't going to back down. We've done everything we can, Julie said quietly, breaking the silence. Tomorrow, we face them in court. We're ready. Maya took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. I don't know what's going to happen, Julie. But I know one thing, I don't want to live with them. I want to stay here with you. Julie reached out, taking Maya's hand. I know, Maya. I want that, too. And no matter what happens tomorrow, we'll keep fighting. I promise. The words didn't ease Maya's nerves, but they gave her a sense of comfort. She wasn't alone in this fight. Julie was with her every step of the way. Together, they had built something that the Andersons could never take away. It wasn't just a home, it was a bond, one that could not be broken by money, power, or lies. The next morning, the courtroom was filled with tension. Maya sat beside Julie, her stomach twisted in knots as she scanned the room. The Andersons had arrived early, their usual smug expressions in place, as if they already knew the outcome. But Maya wasn't going to let them intimidate her. She wasn't going to let them win. Julie leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. Remember, we've got this. We've prepared for this moment. Stick to the truth, Maya. They can't take that from us. Maya nodded, squeezing Julie's hand for reassurance. She had never been in a courtroom before, and the intimidating presence of the judges and lawyers made her feel small, but she wouldn't back down. This was her chance to stand up for herself, for her future. The proceedings began, and the Andersons' lawyer wasted no time in presenting his case. They painted a picture of a young girl torn between two worlds, a child in need of stability and guidance, things they claimed Julie couldn't provide. It was a tactic, designed to make Julie look unfit, to make her appear like a person who couldn't be trusted with Maya's future. But when it was their turn, Julie and Ryan presented the evidence they had gathered, the shady real estate deals, the manipulative practices, the use of custody cases to control families. The Andersons had been hiding behind a veil of respectability, but now, the truth was coming to light. Maya felt a surge of hope as the judge listened carefully, clearly weighing the evidence. This wasn't going to be easy, but they were in the fight of their lives, and for the first time in weeks, Maya allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The courtroom was quiet, save for the soft shuffle of papers and the murmurs of the people seated around them. Maya could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall, each tick feeling like an eternity. Her heart raced in her chest, her palms sweating as she sat next to Julie, her nerves a tight knot. They had prepared for this day, had planned every step, every move, but nothing could quite prepare her for the intensity of the moment. Julie sat beside her, her face composed, though Maya could sense the tension in her every muscle. It was hard to believe that just a few months ago, they had been living a peaceful life, unaware of the storm that was about to engulf them. Now, they were standing at the edge of a battle they couldn't afford to lose. "Maya, stay calm," Julie whispered, squeezing her hand. "We're in this together." Maya nodded, trying to steady her breathing. But it wasn't easy. The Andersons were across the room, sitting together with their lawyer, wearing their usual polished, perfect expressions. They looked confident, almost as if they already knew the outcome. But Maya wasn't going to let them intimidate her anymore. She was done being afraid. The judge, a stern man with sharp features and glasses perched on his nose, cleared his throat and called the court to order. The proceedings were about to begin. "Ms. Anderson, your lawyer may begin," the judge said, his voice firm. The Andersons' lawyer stood up, adjusting his suit before addressing the court. "Your Honor, we are here today to discuss the well-being of Maya Williams, a young girl who deserves a stable and secure home. It is clear that she has been living in an environment that is not fit for a child her age. Ms. Davis, while she may have good intentions, is not equipped to provide the kind of stability that Maya needs. We are requesting full custody of Maya so that she may be placed in a home where her future can be properly secured." Maya's heart sank as she listened to the lawyer's words. He was smooth, professional, and made it sound so reasonable. But it was all lies. Maya knew it, and so did Julie. This wasn't about her well-being, it was about the Andersons getting what they wanted, control. Julie stood up, her voice calm but unwavering as she addressed the court. "Your Honor, I'm not here to make excuses or pretend to be perfect. I am here because I love Maya. She is my daughter in every way that matters, and I've done everything in my power to give her a good life. I know the Andersons are trying to paint me as unfit, but that's not the truth. We've built a life together, and I will do whatever it takes to protect it." Julie's words rang with conviction, and Maya could see the strength in her eyes. It gave her the courage to sit up straighter, to push away the fear that had been creeping up on her. This was the moment. This was their fight. Ryan, their private investigator, stood beside them, holding a stack of papers. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady, "we have gathered substantial evidence that the Andersons have used custody cases like this one to manipulate families and gain access to valuable properties. The Andersons have been involved in shady real estate dealings, using vulnerable families as pawns in their schemes. We have documents to prove that the Andersons have used custody to further their business interests, and we believe that their interest in Maya is part of a much larger and much more troubling pattern." Maya felt a shiver run down her spine as Ryan laid the documents on the table. It was the moment they had been waiting for, the truth was finally out in the open. Julie had been right all along. The Andersons weren't interested in her well-being. They were after something far more dangerous. And now, they couldn't hide it anymore. The judge flipped through the papers, his expression unreadable. Maya couldn't tell if he was swayed by the evidence or if he was just trying to process it all. The room was tense, every eye in the courtroom fixed on the judge as he reviewed the documents. Finally, the judge looked up, his gaze sharp and measured. "Ms. Anderson, your lawyer, I suggest you respond to these allegations. This is a serious matter." The Andersons' lawyer, visibly flustered, cleared his throat and tried to recover his composure. "Your Honor, these claims are completely unfounded. They are an attempt to discredit the Andersons and undermine their desire to provide a stable home for Maya. This is nothing more than a smear campaign." Julie didn't let him finish. "It's not a smear campaign. It's the truth. And the truth is that Maya is not a commodity for the Andersons to buy and sell. She is a person, with a right to a life of love and stability, a life that we can give her." Maya's chest swelled with emotion. Julie wasn't just defending her, she was defending everything they had built together. The life they had fought for, the love they had shared, it all hinged on this moment. And for the first time in weeks, Maya felt a surge of hope. They had exposed the Andersons for who they truly were. They had no more lies to hide behind. The judge took a moment to gather his thoughts. Maya could hear her own breath in her ears, the silence in the room deafening. She didn't know what was going to happen next, but she knew one thing for sure, she wasn't going to let them win. Later that afternoon, after the proceedings had ended for the day, Maya and Julie sat in the courthouse lobby, waiting for the judge's decision. The tension between them was palpable, but there was also a quiet sense of optimism. For the first time, Maya felt like they might actually have a chance at winning this fight. "Julie, what if the judge doesn't believe us? What if he still gives them custody?" Maya asked, her voice shaking slightly. Julie reached over, taking Maya's hand in hers. "We've done everything we could, Maya. We've told the truth, and we've shown the judge who the Andersons really are. No matter what happens, we've fought for what's right. And that's all we can do." Maya squeezed her hand, trying to steady herself. The waiting was the hardest part. They had laid their cards on the table, exposed the lies and the corruption, but now they had to wait for the judge to make his ruling. It was a game of patience. A game that Maya hoped they would win. The air in the courtroom felt heavy, like the kind of silence that precedes a storm. Maya sat nervously beside Julie, her fingers tightly gripping the edge of the chair. They had given everything they had, every shred of evidence, every argument, and every ounce of their will. Now, all they could do was wait for the judge's decision. The uncertainty was almost unbearable, but Maya was determined to hold on to the hope that had sparked within her. Julie sat beside her, her calm demeanor unwavering. She'd always been the steady force in Maya's life, the one who never wavered, even when things seemed impossible. But Maya could sense the weight Julie was carrying, the strain of the battle they were fighting together. Julie had always been a fighter, but this case was different. It wasn't just about winning, it was about protecting their family. As they waited, Maya tried to steady her thoughts. She kept replaying the evidence they had presented, the Andersons' shady real estate dealings, their attempts to manipulate families for their own gain. It wasn't enough to guarantee victory, but it was a start. Maya had never felt more vulnerable, yet somehow, she also felt a sense of power. For the first time in her life, she was fighting for what was truly hers. Maya couldn't help but glance at the Andersons, sitting across the room with their lawyer. Their smug expressions made her blood boil. She could see the condescension in their eyes, the belief that they were above the law, that they could get away with anything. But they didn't know who they were up against. They didn't know the strength that Maya and Julie shared. "Maya, listen to me," Julie said quietly, leaning in closer. No matter what happens, we've done the right thing. We've stood up for ourselves, for our family. That's something they can never take from us. Maya turned to her, the weight of Julie's words sinking in. But what if we lose? What if the judge sides with them? Julie smiled softly, squeezing her hand. Then we fight again. But we won't lose, Maya. We can't. We have the truth on our side. Before Maya could respond, the courtroom doors opened, and the judge entered, signaling that the time had come. The room fell silent in an instant. Everyone stood as the judge took his seat, and Maya's heart pounded in her chest. This was it. The moment they had been waiting for. Please be seated, the judge said, his voice authoritative. I have reviewed all the evidence presented by both parties. This has been a difficult case, and I have taken great care in considering the facts before me. Maya held her breath, every muscle in her body tense. The judge paused for a moment, his eyes scanning the room before he continued. After careful consideration, I have come to a decision regarding the custody of Maya Williams, he said, his tone serious but measured. Maya's pulse quickened as she exchanged a glance with Julie. They had no idea what the judge was about to say. The air in the room felt thick with anticipation. The judge's gaze shifted to the Andersons, then back to Julie and Maya. It is clear that Maya's best interests have been thoroughly considered by all parties. I have reviewed the evidence, including the claims of manipulation and unethical behavior surrounding the Andersons' financial dealings. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the weight of the judge's words. He was acknowledging the truth they had fought so hard to expose. While I cannot ignore the concerns raised about Ms. Davis's ability to provide the stability that Maya needs, I find that the Andersons' actions have raised serious ethical questions. The evidence of their manipulation is deeply troubling, and I cannot, in good conscience, place Maya in their care. Maya's heart soared as the judge's words sunk in. Could it be? Were they actually going to win? The judge paused again, letting his words settle before continuing. Therefore, I am granting joint custody of Maya Williams to Ms. Davis. The Andersons will not be granted full custody, and their involvement in this case will be reviewed further by the appropriate authorities. A wave of relief flooded through Maya, and she felt her knees weaken beneath her. She had to steady herself on the chair, her hands shaking with disbelief. They had won. They had actually won. Julie, her face pale but relieved, reached over and squeezed Maya's hand tightly. We did it, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. You're staying with me. You're safe. The Andersons' lawyer stood up, his face flushed with anger, but the judge silenced him with a stern look. This case is closed for today, the judge said. You may file your objections with the court if you choose, but for now, the decision is final. The Andersons' smug expressions faded as they realized that their grip on Maya had slipped. They had underestimated Julie, and they had underestimated Maya's strength. They had underestimated the love that bound them together. As the court session adjourned, Maya and Julie stood up, their hands still clasped together. Julie's arm slid around Maya's shoulders in a protective embrace, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Maya felt safe. She looked up at Julie, her heart full of gratitude and love. We did it, Maya said again, her voice shaky but full of emotion. We really did it. Julie smiled, her eyes brimming with tears. Yes, we did. And I'll never stop fighting for you, Maya. You're my daughter, and nothing, will ever change that. Maya smiled back, feeling the weight of her words sink in. She wasn't just staying with Julie, she was finally home. And no one, not even the Andersons, could take that away from her. The drive back to their house was quiet but filled with a sense of peace Maya hadn't felt in weeks. Julie was calm but thoughtful, her eyes occasionally flicking to Maya as they drove through the familiar streets. The world outside seemed unchanged, but Maya knew that everything had shifted. Their fight had been long, and there were still battles to come, but for now, they had won. They had found a way to protect their family, and that was all that mattered. When they arrived home, Sparky was waiting at the door, his tail wagging furiously as he greeted them. Maya bent down to hug him, feeling his warmth and love as he licked her face. "We made it, buddy," Maya said softly, her voice filled with emotion. Julie smiled as she watched them. "We did," she said. "We made it together." Maya looked at her, the weight of everything they had been through finally sinking in. There was so much uncertainty in the world, so much darkness, but in this moment, there was only light. She was safe. They were safe. And that was all that mattered. The days following the judge's decision felt like a blur. Maya and Julie had emerged victorious, but the victory was bittersweet. There was no denying the relief that came with the ruling, but there was still work to be done. The Andersons had vowed to fight on, their lawyer already preparing to appeal the decision. The battle was far from over. But for now, they had a moment of peace, a brief, fragile moment to breathe. Julie had taken the week off work, something Maya had never seen her do before. It was a small, quiet victory in itself, a chance for them to reconnect and rebuild. They spent their days together, watching movies, going for walks with Sparky, and sitting in the park, letting the world outside continue without them. For the first time in months, Maya felt like they could finally live again. No more hiding, no more worrying about the next step. They were safe. It was early one morning, the sun just starting to rise, when Maya woke up to the smell of pancakes drifting from the kitchen. She stretched lazily, her mind still foggy from sleep, and got out of bed. As she walked into the kitchen, she saw Julie at the stove, flipping pancakes with a practiced hand. Julie turned to her, her face breaking into a smile. "Good morning, sunshine. Sleep well?" Maya nodded, her stomach growling at the sight of the pancakes. "I did. This is nice, the pancakes, I mean." Julie chuckled, setting the pancakes on a plate and placing them on the table. "Well, I thought we could start our day right. We've earned a little normalcy, don't you think?" Maya smiled back, sitting down at the table. She could feel the warmth in her chest as she took in the simple moment, a far cry from the courtroom drama and sleepless nights they'd just endured. This was their life, and it felt like home. As they ate breakfast, the conversation was light. They talked about everything and nothing, Julie's work, Maya's school, Sparky's antics. For the first time in what felt like forever, they didn't have to worry about what came next. They could just be, together. And it felt perfect. Later that afternoon, Julie took Maya to the park. The air was fresh and crisp, the sky a perfect shade of blue. Maya ran ahead, her laughter echoing through the park as Sparky bounded after her. Julie walked behind them, a contented smile on her face as she watched them play. There was something about the simplicity of the moment that made Maya feel truly at peace. "I'm glad we're doing this," Maya said, slowing her pace as she caught up to Julie. Julie looked down at her, her eyes soft with affection. "Me too, sweetie. It's nice to just be out here, without the world weighing us down." They sat on a bench, watching Sparky run in circles, barking happily. The peace they'd found felt fragile, but Maya knew it was theirs to protect. The weight of the past was still there were still court battles looming, still the threat of the Andersons and their relentless pursuit. But for now, in this moment, they had found something that the Andersons couldn't touch. They had each other. As they sat in the park, the door to a new chapter seemed to open before them. Julie had promised that they would face whatever came next, together. And for Maya, that promise meant everything. That evening, after dinner, Julie sat down with Maya at the kitchen table, the calmness of the night settling in around them. "I've been thinking," Julie began, her voice steady but thoughtful. "We've been through so much lately, and I want to make sure we're ready for whatever comes next." Maya looked up at her, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. "We'll face it together, right?" Like we always do. Julie nodded. Exactly. But I also want to make sure that you feel safe, Maya. I want us to be prepared, no matter what. I've been talking to a lawyer about the possibility of making our case even stronger. We need to be ready for any challenge they throw our way. Maya's stomach tightened. She knew this wasn't over. But Julie's words reassured her. Julie was the kind of person who didn't back down, no matter how hard things got. And Maya had learned that, in the face of adversity, they were stronger together. I trust you, Maya said softly, her voice filled with the weight of their shared journey. I know you'll do whatever it takes to protect me. I'm not scared anymore, Julie. Not with you. Julie's eyes softened, and she reached across the table to take Maya's hand. I'll always protect you. Always. As they sat there, the quiet of the night wrapping around them, Maya felt a sense of calm wash over her. The future was uncertain, but she wasn't afraid. With Julie by her side, she felt invincible. Together, they could face anything. No matter what came next, they would weather the storm, because they had love, and that was all they needed. The next few weeks flew by in a blur of routine. Maya had started school again, and though there were moments when the weight of everything they'd been through would hit her, she always found solace in Julie's steady presence. They went to therapy together, talking through their feelings and rebuilding trust. It wasn't always easy, but each day brought them closer to a sense of normalcy. They were healing, slowly but surely. One evening, as the leaves started to change color, Maya and Julie sat together in the living room, the TV playing quietly in the background. Sparky curled up at their feet, and the peacefulness of the moment settled over them. I've been thinking, Maya said, her voice quiet. Maybe we could get a dog, just for me. A friend of my own, someone who's mine. Julie smiled, looking at Maya with a thoughtful expression. You know, I think that's a great idea. It could be something special for you. Maya beamed, feeling the warmth of the idea settle in her heart. I think I'd like that. A little friend to help me feel safe, you know. Julie nodded, her eyes glimmering with affection. Then let's make it happen. We'll go to the shelter this weekend, okay? Maya's heart lifted. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she could plan for the future without fear. They were going to be okay. No matter what happened, they were going to be okay. As she sat back on the couch, looking over at Julie, Maya knew that this was just the beginning of their new life, one filled with love, hope, and the strength to face whatever came next. Despite the victory in court, there were days when Maya couldn't shake the feeling that the past was never far behind. She had moments of peace, yes, but there was always a nagging sense that the Andersons' next move was waiting just around the corner. She didn't talk about it often, but she could see the concern in Julie's eyes, too. They were living on borrowed time, and Maya knew it. Julie had been working overtime to ensure their case was airtight. She'd contacted a few trusted attorneys, all of whom had warned them that the Andersons wouldn't give up easily. Maya could hear Julie late at night, making phone calls, strategizing, and preparing for what they both knew was inevitable, another court battle. But Julie was determined to protect her. That much Maya could count on. One particular Saturday afternoon, as autumn leaves fluttered in the breeze, Maya and Julie found themselves sitting at the kitchen table, a stack of papers spread out before them. Julie looked over the legal documents, her brow furrowed in concentration. Maya sat quietly beside her, her fingers tapping anxiously on the table. We can't just wait around for them to make their move, Julie said after a long pause, looking up from the papers. We need to be proactive. I'm going to contact a few more lawyers, ones who specialize in these types of custody cases. We need to make sure we're ready for anything. Maya nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about the Andersons, their smug faces when they'd lost in court. They hadn't taken the loss well. She could still remember the way Mr. Anderson's jaw had clenched, his eyes burning with rage. Maya shuddered at the thought. She had a feeling they weren't done with her yet. Do you think they'll try to take me away again? Maya asked, her voice barely a whisper. It was a question she hadn't dared ask before, afraid of the answer. Julie reached over, taking Maya's hand in hers. Maya, I won't let that happen. I swear. They may try, but we're ready for them. We've already won, and we'll win again, no matter what. But Maya wasn't so sure. There were still days when fear crept into her heart, days when she couldn't quite escape the images of her past life with the Andersons. The endless pressure to be perfect, the isolation, and the constant anxiety that she was never enough. Those memories were hard to shake, no matter how hard Julie tried to reassure her. As the afternoon wore on, Julie focused on her research, leaving Maya to her own thoughts. Maya had always been a quiet child, preferring to observe the world around her rather than talk about it. But these days, she felt a growing need to be more than just a passive participant in her life. She wanted to be active, to take control, to protect what was hers. That evening, after dinner, Maya found herself sitting alone in her room, her thoughts swirling. She could hear Julie's soft laughter downstairs, the sound of Sparky's tail thumping against the floor, but it felt distant. Maya had always prided herself on being strong, but in that moment, she felt vulnerable, uncertain. Would she ever truly feel safe again? Would she ever stop looking over her shoulder? The knock on her door startled her. Maya. Julie's voice came softly through the door. Can I come in? Yeah, Maya called out, wiping her eyes quickly. She didn't want Julie to see her like this, weak, scared. Julie stepped into the room, her eyes soft with concern. Hey, what's going on? Maya hesitated for a moment before speaking, her voice cracking slightly. I don't know if I can do this, Julie. I don't know if I can keep fighting. I'm so tired. What if they win? What if I lose you? Julie's heart ached as she sat beside Maya on the bed, pulling her into a tight embrace. You're not going to lose me, Maya. I'll never let that happen. We've been through too much to let fear take over. We've already won, okay? And we'll keep winning, together. Maya buried her face in Julie's shoulder, letting the warmth of her words wash over her. She knew that Julie would do anything to protect her, but it was hard not to feel overwhelmed by everything they had been through. It felt like they were always one step away from disaster, one setback away from losing it all. But Julie was right. They had already won so much. And in that moment, Maya realized that she couldn't keep living in fear. The past might haunt her, but it didn't define her. She had the power to shape her own future, and Julie would be by her side every step of the way. I'm scared, Julie, Maya admitted softly, pulling back to look her in the eyes. But I don't want to let them win. You won't, Julie said firmly, brushing a strand of hair from Maya's face. We won't. You're stronger than you know, Maya. And I'm here. I'm always here. Maya smiled through her tears, feeling the weight of her fears slowly begin to lift. She wasn't alone anymore. She had Julie, she had Sparky, and she had a future to look forward to. She wasn't going to let the Andersons steal that from her. Not again. I'm ready to fight, Maya said, her voice steady now. I'm ready to win. Julie kissed the top of her head. That's my girl. We've got this. As the night settled in and the world outside grew quiet, Maya felt a new sense of resolve building inside her. She wasn't just a victim of the past anymore. She was a fighter. And with Julie by her side, there was nothing she couldn't face. Maya woke up to a chilly morning, the kind where the air bites at your skin and makes you feel alive. She pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders and rolled out of bed, heading toward the window to look outside. The sun was just starting to rise, casting long shadows across the lawn. It was the beginning of another day, but something felt different, something felt like it had shifted inside her, like a switch had been flipped. The night before, after their conversation, Maya had made a decision. She wasn't going to hide anymore. The fear, the doubt, it was all part of her past, and she couldn't let it control her future. Julie was right. They had already won once, and they would win again. She just had to be strong enough to keep fighting. She walked downstairs, where Julie was in the kitchen, preparing coffee. Sparky, as always, was bouncing around her feet, wagging his tail excitedly. Maya couldn't help but smile. It was the little things, moments like these, that made everything feel worth it. "Morning," Julie greeted, her voice warm and comforting. "Sleep okay?" "Yeah," Maya replied, feeling lighter than she had in days. "I've been thinking a lot. About everything. And I've decided. I'm ready to fight. Ready to keep going." Julie looked up from the coffee pot, her eyes filled with pride. "That's my girl. You've got this. We've got this." They sat down together at the kitchen table, the silence between them comfortable. Sparky hopped onto Maya's lap, curling up with a contented sigh, and for a moment, the world outside seemed to disappear. It was just Maya, Julie, and their little dog, a perfect little bubble of peace. But Maya knew, deep down, that the peace couldn't last forever. The Andersons were still out there, and the real battle had only just begun. The next week, Julie had arranged a meeting with a new lawyer, someone she had been recommended by a colleague. The lawyer, a tall woman with short brown hair and a no-nonsense attitude, had already taken on cases like theirs before. Her name was Rachel Daniels, and from the moment Maya and Julie sat down in her office, Maya felt a sense of calm. Rachel wasn't here to sugarcoat things, but she also wasn't here to make false promises. She was here to fight. "I know you've been through a lot," Rachel began, her voice firm and steady. "But let me be clear, this case isn't over. We will do everything we can to ensure that Maya's future is secure, and that no one will be able to take her from you." Maya sat forward in her chair, her eyes focused on Rachel. "What do we need to do?" Rachel nodded, flipping through some papers. "The Andersons are likely going to appeal the judge's decision. They won't just let this go. But I've handled cases like this before. We're going to make sure they don't stand a chance." Julie squeezed Maya's hand under the table, offering her a silent promise of support. Maya squeezed back, feeling her heart swell with gratitude. She wasn't alone in this fight. She had Julie by her side, and now, they had Rachel, someone who was ready to take the fight to the Andersons. Rachel spent the next hour outlining their strategy, explaining the steps they would take to make the case as airtight as possible. Maya listened intently, taking in every word, determined to understand what they were up against. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but Maya was done with letting fear rule her life. She had a family now, Julie, Sparky, and her own determination. She wasn't going to let anyone take that away. After the meeting, they drove home in silence. Maya sat in the back seat, looking out the window as the world passed by. Her mind was racing, and she couldn't help but think of what lay ahead. The uncertainty, the stress, the challenges. It all felt overwhelming at times, but the thought of giving up was even worse. She had fought for this new life, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. When they got home, Julie sat down beside Maya on the couch. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice soft but concerned. Maya took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. "I'm scared. But I'm also ready. I want to fight for this, for us. For our family." Julie's eyes softened, and she pulled Maya into a hug. "We'll get through this. Together." Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her fear begin to lift. It wasn't going to be easy, but she wasn't afraid anymore. As long as Julie was by her side, she could face anything. The following days were filled with preparations. Rachel worked tirelessly on their case, and Maya did everything she could to support her. She attended therapy, made sure her schoolwork was in order, and even started running again, something she hadn't done in months. Running had always been her way of clearing her mind, of pushing out the noise and focusing on the present. Each mile she ran, Maya felt stronger, physically and emotionally. With every step, she was reminded of the power of persistence. She wasn't going to let the past define her. She was running toward her future. Julie, too, kept busy. She continued her work, but she also made sure to be there for Maya in every way possible. Their bond had grown even stronger since that first moment in the courtroom when Maya had looked up at her with that secret signal. They were a team, and nothing would break them apart. By the end of the week, they had a new sense of resolve. The Andersons might try to fight them, but they wouldn't win. Maya knew now that her strength didn't just come from fighting back, it came from embracing the love and support of the people around her. She had Julie. She had Sparky. And she had herself. As the sun began to set that evening, Maya stood at the window, watching the last rays of light disappear behind the horizon. The world outside seemed vast and uncertain, but Maya felt grounded in a way she never had before. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. And that was something no one could take away from her. Julie came up behind her, wrapping her arms around Maya's waist. "You ready?" she asked softly. Maya turned, meeting her eyes with a smile. "I've always been ready." Together, they stood at the window, looking out at the world before them. The road ahead was uncertain, but with each other by their side, they knew they could handle whatever came their way. The days leading up to the next court date were a whirlwind. Maya had always thought that life was hard, but this was something else. There were times when it felt like her whole world was spinning out of control. Despite Julie's constant reassurance and the strength she felt when she was with her, doubt crept in at the most unexpected moments. The weight of the past, the memories of the Andersons, and the looming fear of losing everything again, it was starting to feel like too much. Each time Maya looked at Sparky, or saw Julie working tirelessly on the case, she felt a growing pressure on her chest, as though the walls were closing in. It was a Thursday afternoon when it hit her hardest. Julie had been on the phone with Rachel for hours, discussing the next steps in the case. Maya was at the kitchen table, trying to focus on her homework, but her mind kept wandering. The clock ticked loudly in the silence of the room, every second stretching longer than the last. She felt like she was drowning, unable to breathe as the pressure mounted. She stood up abruptly, needing air, needing to escape the suffocating feeling. Grabbing her jacket, she headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Julie called after her, her voice sharp with concern. Maya didn't answer at first. She just kept walking. Julie was always there for her, always comforting her, but in that moment, Maya couldn't face the uncertainty anymore. She didn't want to talk about the case, didn't want to think about the looming trial. She needed a break from everything. Outside, the cold air hit her face like a slap. Maya pulled her jacket tighter around her and walked aimlessly, her thoughts clouded. She found herself near the park, her feet moving automatically as she walked along the familiar path. It wasn't until she reached the old bench by the swings that she stopped, taking a seat and burying her face in her hands. What if it wasn't enough? What if they lost? Maya's breath came in short, panicked bursts. She hadn't felt this way in a long time, but the fear and the pressure had built up so much that it had finally cracked her. She could hear Julie's voice in her head, reminding her that they would win, but in that moment, the certainty wasn't enough. "Maya?" Maya looked up, startled to see Rachel standing in front of her. How long had she been there? Her mind raced, trying to process the sudden appearance of her lawyer. Rachel sat down next to her on the bench, giving her a moment of silence before speaking. "I know it's hard," she said softly, "but I need you to hear me, okay? This isn't going to be easy. You're right to be scared. But that doesn't mean you have to carry all of this alone." Maya wiped her eyes and shook her head. "I don't know if I can do this. I'm so tired, Rachel. I feel like everything's falling apart. Rachel's voice was steady and compassionate. I've been in this business a long time, and I've seen clients go through some of the toughest battles you can imagine. But every single one of them came out the other side because they didn't give up. And neither will you. Maya took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. What if I fail? Rachel gave her a small smile. You're not going to fail. You've already come so far. You've fought for your place here, for your safety. You've already shown more strength than most people ever will. But what if it's not enough? Maya's voice cracked, the vulnerability in her words raw. Rachel turned to face her fully, her eyes unwavering. What if it is? What if this is the moment where everything changes? The moment you finally take control of your own life? Maya looked at Rachel, unsure what to say. She wanted to believe that, she wanted to feel like she had the power to change things. But the fear was overwhelming. Rachel continued, I've seen your courage, Maya. You're not the scared little girl you once were. You're not alone in this. And if you're ready to keep going, we'll fight this together. But you have to decide. Are you ready to face this challenge head-on? Or are you going to let fear control you? Maya swallowed hard, the weight of Rachel's words sinking in. It wasn't just about her anymore. It wasn't just about surviving the past. It was about taking control of her future. And she realized, as she sat there on that bench, that no matter how much fear tried to hold her back, she wasn't going to let it win. I'm ready, Maya said, her voice steady for the first time in weeks. I won't let them take this from me. Not again. Rachel's expression softened, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. That's what I like to hear. By the time Maya returned home, she felt different. The weight had shifted. The overwhelming pressure was still there, but it no longer felt suffocating. Maya was ready to fight, and she knew, deep down, that she wasn't alone. Julie was waiting for her in the living room, her eyes full of worry. But when she saw the determination in Maya's face, the tension seemed to melt away. Where'd you go? Julie asked softly, her voice hesitant. I just needed some time, Maya replied. She walked over to Julie, sitting down beside her on the couch. But I'm ready now. I'm ready to fight. Julie pulled Maya into her arms, holding her tightly. We'll do this together, she said, her voice soft and comforting. Maya nodded, her heart swelling with love for the woman who had stood by her side through it all. No matter what happened, they were a team. And nothing would break that bond. As the days passed, the court date loomed closer, and the pressure continued to mount. But Maya knew, now more than ever, that she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her future, for the life she had with Julie, for the family they were building. And that, she realized, was worth everything. The days leading up to the court hearing felt like an eternity. Maya's nerves were on edge, but she was determined. With Rachel's steady guidance and Julie's unyielding support, she'd come a long way since the first trial. This time, things were going to be different. Maya wasn't just going to fight for herself, she was going to fight for the life she had built with Julie, the family they had created. She was fighting for Sparky, who always seemed to sense when she needed comfort, and for every small victory they had achieved together. That morning, Maya stood in front of the mirror, her reflection staring back at her. She saw the same girl she'd always known, but there was something new in her eyes now, something stronger, more resolute. The journey had been long, and she had faced moments of doubt and fear, but she was ready. The past no longer held power over her. Maya, you ready? Julie's voice pulled her out of her thoughts. Maya turned to find her standing in the doorway, looking as calm and collected as ever, despite the storm of emotions swirling around her. Yeah, Maya said, her voice steady. She smiled at Julie, who returned the smile with a look of quiet pride. Let's do this. Julie nodded and walked over, taking Maya's hand in hers. No matter what happens, we've got each other. You've come so far. I'm proud of you, Maya. Maya squeezed her hand, feeling a surge of gratitude. I couldn't have done it without you. They made their way to the car, and as they drove to the courthouse, the silence in the car wasn't uncomfortable, it was a quiet understanding. Both of them were on edge, their minds filled with what lay ahead, but neither of them said a word. They didn't need to. They both knew this was a turning point in their lives, a day that would define their future. When they arrived at the courthouse, the familiar sense of anxiety returned, a tight knot in Maya's stomach. She could see the Andersons' lawyer, a tall man with a cold demeanor, standing off to the side. He didn't look at them directly, but Maya could feel his presence. The battle was far from over, and it felt like the stakes had never been higher. Stay close to me, Rachel instructed as they walked toward the entrance. She was calm, confident, a rock in the storm. Maya tried to mirror her composure, but her heart was racing. Inside the courtroom, the tension was palpable. It was as if everyone in the room was holding their breath, waiting for the next move. Maya's gaze drifted toward the Andersons, who were sitting at the other side of the room, their expressions hard and unreadable. Maya could feel the weight of their eyes, but she refused to look away. She wasn't going to let them intimidate her. Julie squeezed her hand, offering her a reassuring smile. Maya's pulse quickened as she took her seat beside Julie, waiting for the judge to enter. And then, it was time. The proceedings began, and Maya listened intently as the lawyers for both sides made their opening statements. The Andersons' lawyer was smooth, slick with his words, painting a picture of chaos and instability in Maya's life. He made it seem like she was nothing more than a pawn in a game she didn't fully understand. Maya felt her stomach churn, but she refused to let the words break her. Rachel, on the other hand, was a force to be reckoned with. Her arguments were clear, concise, and full of emotion. She spoke of Maya's strength, her resilience, and her desire to be with the person who loved her and cared for her, Julie. She talked about the bond they shared, the love that had blossomed between them despite all the adversity they had faced. Maya's throat tightened as Rachel spoke, and she felt a lump form in her chest. She wanted to be strong, to stand tall, but hearing the words spoken about her life, her journey, made it all feel so real. This wasn't just about the Andersons. It wasn't just about the trial. It was about her. It was about the future she wanted, the future she had fought for. As the hours passed, the trial seemed to drag on, each moment stretching longer than the last. Maya's eyes grew tired, but she kept her focus. She could feel Julie beside her, her steady presence a constant source of strength. She could hear Rachel's voice, unwavering, as she made her case with passion and conviction. It wasn't until late in the afternoon that the moment finally arrived. It was time for Maya to take the stand. Maya's heart hammered in her chest as she stood up and walked to the witness stand. The room seemed to blur around her, the sounds muffled, as she focused on the task ahead. She didn't look at the Andersons. She didn't look at their lawyer. Her eyes were locked on the judge. Miss Maya, we've heard a lot of testimony today, the judge began, his voice calm but firm. Now, I'd like to hear from you. Please, tell me your side of the story. Maya took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She thought of everything she had gone through, the pain, the fear, the loss, but most of all, she thought about the love she shared with Julie. That love was what had brought her here, and it was the truth that she would stand by. I just want to be with my family, Maya began, her voice shaky at first but growing stronger with each word. Julie is my family. I've never felt more loved, more accepted, than I do when I'm with her. She's shown me what it means to be cared for. She's given me a home. And I can't go back to a life where I'm alone again. There was a pause, and Maya glanced at the judge. His expression was unreadable, but she could see that he was listening, really listening. I know it's been hard, Maya continued, her voice gaining strength. But I'm not the same person I was when this all started. I've learned so much. And I know now that I can be strong. I can stand up for myself. I can stand up for the people I love. She paused again, swallowing back the emotion rising in her throat. I want to be with Julie. I want to stay with her. And I hope you can see that this is where I belong. The room was silent. Maya felt like time had stopped, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Her heart pounded, but she felt lighter somehow, like she had finally said what she needed to say, what she had been holding inside for so long. The judge nodded slowly, his eyes softening just a fraction. Thank you, Miss Maya. You've made your feelings very clear. As Maya sat back down, Julie's hand found hers once again. She gave it a gentle squeeze, a silent promise of support. Maya had done it. She had spoken her truth. The court adjourned for the day, and as they walked out of the courtroom, Rachel gave them both a reassuring smile. You did great, she said. I think we've got this. Maya looked at Julie, her heart full. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to hope again. The days after Maya's testimony felt like a blur. The anticipation of the decision hung over her like a cloud, dark and heavy. She could see it in Julie's eyes, neither of them were saying much, but they didn't have to. They both knew that the worst part of the battle was now behind them. But the waiting? That was a different kind of torture. Maya couldn't focus on anything for more than a few minutes. The details of the case, the arguments Rachel had made, the cold, calculated words of the Andersons' lawyer, it all replayed in her head like a broken record. Every time she tried to block it out, the doubt crept back in. Had she said enough? Had she convinced the judge that Julie was the right choice for her? She had been so sure before, but now, as the days wore on, a familiar unease started to seep in. Do you want to go out for a walk? Julie asked one evening, her voice soft as she approached Maya, who was sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the papers in front of her. Maya sighed, looking up at Julie. Her eyes were tired, the weight of the waiting pulling her down. But Julie's suggestion was exactly what she needed. Yeah, Maya replied, forcing a smile. I think I need some air. They walked in silence for a while, the evening sky painted in shades of purple and orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air was cool but not uncomfortable, the perfect weather for a walk that neither of them had realized they needed. It wasn't until they reached the park and sat on one of the benches, the world around them quiet and still, that Maya finally spoke. I don't know if I can do this, Julie, Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm scared. Julie's gaze softened as she turned to face Maya, her hand gently finding Maya's. She didn't say anything at first, just held her hand, a silent support in the growing uncertainty between them. You've already done it, Maya, Julie replied, her voice calm but firm. You stood up in that courtroom. You told the truth. And that's more than most people ever do in their lives. You've already proven you're strong enough. Maya shook her head, her chest tight. But what if it's not enough? What if the judge still decides? Julie squeezed her hand, cutting her off. No matter what happens, Maya, we've already built something beautiful together. This trial doesn't change that. We've faced challenges before, and we'll face whatever comes next. But you've already done something incredible. Don't let this fear make you forget how far you've come. Maya closed her eyes, leaning into Julie's touch. For a moment, the fear and the uncertainty melted away. She remembered what Julie had said on the night they met, their love wasn't about perfection, it was about standing together through everything. That was the truth Maya needed to hold on to. I'm scared, Julie, Maya whispered again, her voice cracking. I'm scared of losing everything. Julie's response was gentle, but unwavering. We've already lost a lot, Maya. But what we have now? That's worth fighting for. I'm not going anywhere. And I'm not going to let you face this alone. Maya nodded, wiping away a tear that had escaped. She took a deep breath and turned to Julie, her eyes filled with resolve. I won't give up. Not this time. Julie smiled softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from Maya's face. Good. Because you're not alone. And you won't be. When they returned to the apartment, Rachel was already there, waiting for them. Her presence was always a comfort, her calm, collected energy a stark contrast to the storm of emotions Maya had been feeling. Any news? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't expect an answer just yet, but the hope in her chest was undeniable. Rachel looked up from the legal papers spread out on the coffee table and gave them both a small, reassuring smile. The judge said he'd have a decision by the end of the week. But I have a feeling it's going to go our way. Maya couldn't help but feel a spark of hope, though the weight of the waiting still hung heavy. Julie sat next to Rachel, her arm around Maya's shoulders as they all settled into the familiar rhythm of waiting. It was strange to think that after everything, the decision was still just, pending. The uncertainty felt like a constant companion, and it made everything harder. But Maya couldn't let herself dwell on it. She had to believe that all the fighting, all the sacrifice, had brought them to this moment for a reason. As Rachel continued to go over the final details of the case, Maya let herself relax, even if just for a moment. She knew that whatever came next, it wouldn't be the end. It would be a new beginning. A chance for something more. The next few days were a blur of tense moments and endless questions. Maya couldn't keep her mind from racing, wondering about every possible outcome, every little detail. But as the clock ticked on, something shifted inside her. She had already fought so hard, there was nothing left to do but wait. And trust. Julie could sense the change in her. Every time they spoke about the case, Maya's voice had more conviction. It wasn't just about the outcome anymore, it was about who Maya had become, who they had become together. And then, finally, it was time. It was late Friday afternoon when Rachel called. Maya's heart leapt in her chest, but she tried to steady herself. Are you sitting down? Rachel's voice on the other end was calm but filled with an undercurrent of something else, something Maya couldn't quite place. Yeah, I'm sitting. What's the news? Maya could feel Julie holding her breath beside her. There was a long pause before Rachel spoke again. The judge ruled in your favor. You're going to be able to stay with Julie. Maya's breath caught in her throat, her hands trembling as a wave of emotion crashed over her. Julie squeezed her hand, and Maya could feel the tears welling up in her eyes. It's over. Maya whispered, her voice choked with disbelief. It's over, Rachel confirmed, her voice warm with relief. You did it. For a moment, there was silence on the other end of the line. Maya couldn't find words to express everything she was feeling, gratitude, joy, relief, all at once. But Julie didn't need words. She pulled Maya into a tight embrace, and in that moment, everything felt right. We did it, Maya said softly, her voice full of wonder. We did, Julie agreed, her voice thick with emotion. The moment the judge's ruling came down, everything around Maya seemed to shift. The air felt different, the world outside the courtroom no longer as heavy. She could feel the weight of her decision, of the months of worry and heartache, suddenly lifting. It was as if everything she had fought for, everything she had risked, had led to this singular, life-changing moment. As the news of the ruling spread, Julie and Maya could hardly contain the joy that bubbled up between them. The future, which had once seemed so uncertain, now sparkled with possibility. They had won. They had beaten the odds. They had created a future together. But that night, in the quiet of their apartment, after all the phone calls and congratulatory messages from friends and family, the reality of it all finally settled in. They were together. And now, they could finally breathe. Maya stood at the window, looking out at the city skyline, her thoughts drifting to everything that had brought her here. The journey hadn't been easy, and there had been moments when she had felt like giving up. But now, as she watched the city lights twinkle in the distance, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. Julie walked up behind her, wrapping her arms around Maya's waist. "You're a free woman," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "We're free." Maya turned in Julie's arms, her heart swelling with the love that had carried her through it all. "I never thought it would happen. But we made it," she whispered, her voice full of wonder. Julie kissed her gently, the sweetness of the moment reflecting everything they had fought for. They had made it through the darkest times, the hardest battles. And now, the future was bright. "Do you know what I've been thinking?" Julie asked, her voice thoughtful. Maya raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What?" "I think it's time we start thinking about what's next. The trial's over, but that doesn't mean the journey is finished. We've got so much ahead of us. And I want to start building that future now." Maya smiled, her heart skipping a beat. "You mean like, for real? You and me, together, forever?" Julie's eyes sparkled. "Exactly. Let's make the most of this life we've fought so hard for." For a moment, Maya stood there, wrapped in Julie's arms, feeling more at peace than she ever thought possible. The fear that had once defined her life, the uncertainty that had clouded her every decision, was gone. Now, it was just love. Just hope. And a future that was wide open. The next few weeks were filled with quiet celebration. Maya and Julie spent their time making plans for the life they would build together. Maya, now fully aware of the love and the support that surrounded her, couldn't help but feel grateful for how far she had come. Julie had never been one to rush things, but she was eager to build their life, brick by brick. Together, they began to talk about the future in earnest. They discussed the possibility of a new home, one that would be theirs, truly and completely. They talked about travel, about family, and about the kind of life they wanted to build. They also made a decision that felt more important than anything else: they were going to get married. The wedding planning was nothing extravagant, but to Maya, it was the most meaningful thing she had ever done. The day they stood in front of friends, family, and those who had supported them, exchanging vows, would be the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter not defined by pain or uncertainty, but by love, commitment, and a deep understanding of each other. As they sat down to dinner one evening, Julie took Maya's hand and smiled. "I think our story is just beginning," she said, her voice warm. Maya nodded, a sense of peace filling her. "Yeah, it is. And it's going to be the best story." As the months passed, life settled into a rhythm of normalcy that Maya had once dreamed of. Sparky, their ever-present companion, had become an even bigger part of their lives. It was a joy to see him grow alongside them, his loyalty and affection a constant reminder of the beauty of the family they had built together. Rachel continued to be a close friend and advisor, her legal skills invaluable in ensuring that Maya's future remained secure. Julie's parents, who had been hesitant at first, had come around, offering their support and even attending the small, intimate wedding they had planned. It felt like everything had come together in a way Maya had never imagined. But through it all, one thing remained unchanged: Maya's love for Julie. Every day, she was reminded of how lucky she was to have found her. The woman who had stood by her side through every trial, every heartache, and every triumph. "I'm so glad you're in my life," Maya whispered to Julie one night, as they lay side by side in bed. "I don't know where I'd be without you." Julie smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from Maya's face. "You'd be exactly where you need to be, Maya. But I'm glad we're here, together." And in that moment, as Maya felt Julie's heartbeat beside hers, she knew that this was where she was always meant to be. Together. Free. And ready to face whatever the future held. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?